Hi everyone, I'm Harv, Ian Harvey, founder of Collective Intelligence, and this is Stuff That Matters Now. Welcome back everybody. We are trying to get started here now. I'm with the very grumpy Susan Warren, who is at the moment the CEO of COMET. After this interview, she might be looking for a new job. Good afternoon, Susan.
Kia ora, Harv.
And we've just been trying to get the seats sorted out here, and Susan said that she started getting grumpy when she was 45 and has got grumpier since then. Susan, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for your time. And a wee backstory while Susan sort of settles in here, that I got some critique from Susan about the podcast series very early on. She's pointing at me now, "No, it's my bloody podcast. I'll talk, I'll say whatever I want." And I got this email from Susan. She writes these long emails and pointing out that if the podcast was to be successful, I needed to get it down to 5 minutes so people would listen to it. And I was like, well, just don't listen to it, Susan. And do you remember that?
I do totally. I actually think I said 3 minutes, didn't I?
3 minutes. Get on a 3 minute slot. We're busy. And so today I'm interviewing Susan Warren, and we are going to get this down to 3 minutes. So, because any longer that you guys be boring. And I just think the great irony that here we are now, and you want us to fit all your life and work into 3 minutes. Go. Okay, back on track. But I am so enjoying the irony of that and seeing your discomfort right now. So let's try and get it down to 5 minutes, shall we? Okay. So Susan, who are you?
Who am I? My goodness. Just let's start with a narrow question, shall we? Who am I? I'm, kia ora, ko Susan Warren ho, ko te kaiwhakahaere o te Hononga Akoranga, no ingarahi o kumātua, no tāmaki makaurau ho. So I'm the child of English migrants. I'm the first in my entire extended family to be born in Aotearoa. I grew up in Auckland, and I've lived here most of my life, apart from an interesting but cold sojourn in Dunedin while during university. I'm a mum of two wonderful adults who now live in Brisbane and London, respectively.
Bugger.
Exactly, not the good time for that. And I'm a wife of an awesome, wonderful man I've been with now for 45 years, and I'm the boss here at COMET. For what that's worth, chief cook and bottle washer, the holder of the dream.
What's the dream?
The dream is equity. That's our ultimate goal, and gosh, if we ever achieved that, we could close the doors and be very happy. So how do we get an education system that actually delivers equity for everyone, so they can achieve their own dreams, whatever those might be, through learning throughout life, not just in classrooms between square walls. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's people being able to reach their aspirations and having an equal, not just opportunity, but outcome for that. So for some people that means actually from where they're starting they need more support, more help, more time, more whatever. And they also need a system that actually works for them, which right now we don't have.
And Susan, I've just realised I'm going to take a photo of you at this moment. Just calm down. Sitting here right now,
layering on the joy.
No, because I'm just looking over your shoulders to these posters behind you. and 10 decolonisation actions for non-Māori. And then, and I'm just looking at that and, I'm thinking you have taken on a really challenging role and a really challenging target, right?
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Why did you take this role on?
I came to COMET because I was between jobs, to be honest. I took the role of CE on when the previous CE left because I thought there was a possibility that this organisation could make a difference. And it's a role where there's scope to do what you think is needed. You can say what you think. You will be really aware of how I like that.
Yes.
And you can do what needs doing without having to go through multiple layers of red tape. I'd just come out of 7 years at the Ministry of Education. I know all about red tape.
Yep.
And you can bring people alongside you, like whether within the organisation or just partners, people that you work with outside, who are equally passionate about achieving those same things and who have all kinds of different skills and knowledge that they bring to the picture. So I don't have to know everything. I don't really have to know anything very much at all. I just have to be able to find and inspire awesome people.
And what does COMET do?
If you think of us as a combination between a think tank and an innovation hub. So we look at the education system, where are the points where there's a problem for equity? Well, everywhere, but which ones of them could we maybe make a difference on? And then bring people together to say, well, what could we do about that together? And sometimes the do about is we're going to tell government that they just got it wrong on that area and please can they change. But more often it's about, well, let's actually design some new way of doing that and let's trial it and see how it works and work it up to a point where we could hand it on as being the next normal. Okay,
so now I'm starting to get it, because I came clean with Susan before this interview. I've never known what the hell she's done, and it's always sounded impressive. But I'm going, at some point we're going to have to get to this point and go, what do you do, Susan? So give me a target. Is this primary, secondary, school? What level? Or are you looking across on a whole range of areas?
We think about the whole pathway. So from pre-birth right the way through to, the other end of life. People don't like mentioning that, but because actually learning is what helps you achieve what you want to do at every stage. And most of the money and effort that goes into the education system goes in at schooling. And a heck of a chunk also at university for that small proportion of people who go there. And not many people pay attention to the learning that happens in workplaces and families and communities and parks and all those other places. So we do work with early childhood centres and schools and tertiary organisations. We also work with employers, we work with family-facing organisations, anyone who's interested really in learning.
So the breadth of that I'd imagine at times feels overwhelming.
Yeah, you have to be a bit discerning, and we're not always quite as discerning as we should be.
Right.
So we end up being, we all get passionate. We're a group of people who are really passionate about what we do, and we could just do that. It wouldn't take much time. Oh, no, well, really it'd be just, a case of a meeting or two, and then other people will do it. Well, no, they don't. And you end up with another thing that you're doing, and it's really exciting, but it becomes precious. So that part of my work is trying to have a little bit of a rein on people's enthusiasm sometimes.
Because I was going to say, a passionate, everybody being passionate within a business can be problematic. I've seen that in other areas where it's just too much passion and not enough actually bloody working at what you should be working on. So I'm trying to get my head around your intervention, which will be working, let's say you see something in a secondary school situation that you think needs rectifying. Is that at an individual school or in the system?
Yeah, the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see a problem in the system. What do you then do?
Depends on what it is. So let's take the secondary school example.
Yep.
And our best example of that is the work we've been doing for years on youth employability. So what you find is kids come through secondary school. The curriculum has these things called competencies, which are supposed to be about those soft skills that employers all want, and so does society, about, managing self and time management and working in a team and all those things. But they're not taught or developed in a way that employers can understand, or even that kids can understand how they could use those in the workplace. And so we had this huge mismatch where employers were saying, well, but these young people, they come to us and they can't do any of the things we need them to do. They can't even sort themselves out. And the kids were going, we have no idea what it is that these employers want from us, and we're terrified. If we say a word, we're going to be fired. And so we brought some people together and we designed a youth employability program that is now being used across most of Aotearoa. And it's about actually teaching kids, well, not teaching, but helping kids work through and develop those soft skills and then practice them in the workplace, in work experience, and get feedback on them and kind of iterate between discussing it with their peers and their facilitator and going and having a go in the workplace and then running back and go, the boss said this to me. And, oh, well, think about what we learnt last week about communication and what could you do, and it's amazingly transformational. And
you work across a huge range of ethnic groups, right?
Yeah.
It's because I remember you told me the number of ethnic groups represented in Auckland is what?
Well, there's across Aotearoa there's 180 ethnic groups, and there's 160 or 170 languages.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of those have a different need?
Yeah, they all have a different way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
They all have a different culture, different priorities, lots of similar, but and the languages are all in different places. You've got your things like Te Reo Māori, national language, indigenous, large population, but not so many of them speaking it as they would want. You've got your Samoan, Tongan, those sorts of quite high numbers of people, medium numbers of them speaking it. And then you've got your recent migrant languages, might be really small numbers, might be concentrated in a particular area or really scattered. And so then how do you provide learning in that language for the children of those migrants who really want to still maintain, they want their kids to have their language, but it's really hard to do that on your own, actually.
I've just been reminded that because you talked before the pre-birth learning stuff, and I was reminded about Talking Matters.
Yeah.
You had that program?
We do still have that program, yes.
And just explain what that is.
So Talking Matters is about children in the first 1,000 days and pre-birth. How do we wrap a rich language environment around them, which is basically, at its core, it's people like you and me, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbours, talking in a serve and return way. So a conversation with children, rather than just only giving instructions or talking at them or thinking that because they're not talking yet, we shouldn't be talking to them. But it's that to and fro conversation that actually builds brains. And that's what allows kids to develop not only language but concepts and thinking and ability to do all kinds of things. And, of course, relationships.
And this is science-based stuff? Right?
Totally, yeah. But putting it in practice in families and with family-facing organisations is a whole other level of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see at times in situations on the street or a parent talking really negatively to a kid. And not always, but often they're from a lower socioeconomic group, and you realise how tough their life is, and I don't know what that's like, but I have engaged with kids from that background, and it's vastly different, and you look at that and think, what impact is that having on that child going forward? Because we're so impressionable at that age.
Yeah. Well, then there's a concept of toxic stress, which and particularly applies to kids growing up. So when the family are under many different stresses, and the child is feeling that, then it can have quite serious effects on their development. And there's a certain number of stressors, things like moving house frequently, unemployment, not being able to be sure of the next meal, lots of changing relationships within the family, those sorts of things. They really affect children's development, but there are protections that can be put in place, and one of them is a strong relationship with one stable caregiver who's there through it and who isn't too affected by the toxic stress, and the language with that caregiver can be really protective.
I've shared the story with you some time ago about the young boy who stole my car, and working through the restorative justice program, and it was really good for me because I learned a lot. I think I got more out of it than he did, and unfortunately. And what was interesting was trying to get this young boy back to school, and we did get him back to school, and it was wonderful that one of our members was the principal, and because this boy had caused a few problems and he was selling drugs for the mongrel mob at 13, which I pointed out was wonderful entrepreneurial skills, but maybe we could
redirect.
We could do something else. And we got him back into school. The biggest issue, Susan, was his health was so poor he was often not at school because of the house he lived in. And we tried to get him into a boarding. We did get him into boarding, but it was a step too far. It was naive thinking that he could transition from this into the boarding. That lasted 3 days. And so we got him back into school. But yeah, that was a real surprise to me. And I went along to one evening to a kapahaka competition. So excited to go to this. And I said, where is he? And well, he's sick again. And I'm just going, oh no. And it was just, and he had some bronchial thing, and the house from the outside looked okay. It was a state house, but inside it was damp and mouldy, and that was, and it was really hard to break through that. Really hard to break through that. And so schooling didn't work. Well, I won't go into it because we don't have time today, but the social pressures around him, we were going fine until his uncle got out of jail, and then it went all tits up, and he stopped going to school, and now he is a patch member of the Muggle mob, and it was really hard. It was impossible to fight against that because that's just an ever-present force, and the family were protected by the Muggle mob, and he is a lovely kid. You know, that was the interesting thing. A very soft heart, very well-mannered, a lovely kid. And that was in Fielding. That's in a affluent town, but it goes on everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah.
What makes Susan Warren want to do this work? Where did that start?
I've always been excited about learning, and not my own only, but other people's. I've always seen how that makes a difference for people. So I have this weird drive to make a difference, and it's just a sickness. There's nothing admirable in it. It is a sickness.
It just happens to be projected in the right way, but it's an addiction. It could be somewhere else.
Could be, totally.
Right.
But I do. I want to make a difference, and this is an area that I understand and can do something about, and it's also that the power of learning and the difference that it can make longer term, not just immediately, and that really excites me. And then I look at the education system, and I get really frustrated by the things there that are just obviously not working. It's just like clear. You know, look at the groups that are continually not being well served by our education system. They are the same groups who bring a language other than English to the classroom. And here is this enormous strength that they have. And it's being not only ignored and not used for their learning, but actually often treated as a disadvantage. And so we're getting kids who come into school bilingual, multilingual, and they're leaving monolingual English speakers. And that's still happening in our schools today, and it makes me really angry. You see, you introduced me as the grumpy Susan Warren. It's absolutely true, because I really do get annoyed about that. I get annoyed about the way our system just expects everybody to fit in the same cookie cutter, and if you don't, then we'll just forget about it. But, you know, actually, each person has a unique talent that they could bring. And if we don't develop that, then we are all losing.
And responsible for it.
Yeah.
Are you a pain to live with sometimes?
Well, obviously I'm perfect, but yeah, I'm sure I am. I try not to take too much of this home. I'm very fortunate that I can work out my frustrations with the system at work with other people who are going, yes, it is terrible. And let's do something about it, and we can. And even though we can only do a little bit, we can also mobilise and work with others who can do their little bit too. And so that helps a lot. And I'm very lucky that my husband is very patient and also knows when to say, that's nice, dear, the Olympics are on now.
Can we watch this? Do we have to talk about education and inequity in the system? What's your greatest success?
My kids. Being still married to the same bloke for
it's not a bad effort
while.
By him, I think,
Good.
obviously.
It's probably mute. And At work, I think that, and it's not so COMET's greatest success probably is talking matters. I think it's the most important thing that it's possible to do in the education system, because that's early start is so important, and it's all about families. It's not actually about the professionals. There are many successes. The youth employability work is exciting. That our snapshots are known nationally. We do these infographics of education data, and people quote them when they're applying for funding or they're putting in a proposal. They quote that data that they wouldn't have been able to find on their own, and so that actually makes a difference to decisions that are made about what will we do, what will we not do, what will we fund, what will we not fund. So that's pretty cool too.
And so, Susan, COMET is a not-for-profit. How many people do you have? Do you have a core and then an ecosystem?
So we have a core permanent staff of about 6, and then we have people who are on various levels of contracts. At the moment, we have about 25 in the team, because we have several projects that are at full delivery mode and that are attracting decent funding. A few years ago, we were 7 in all, and we were sort of gradually grown. That won't be permanent. We will go back to smaller in a year or so as as projects move on, and it takes a while to get the next projects coming through. So it's not about size. And then we have several dozen organisations that we're partnering with in one way or another.
What's an example of that as a partner?
So the languages work I do is basically a strategy working group that come together a few times a year, and that has representatives from about a dozen different organisations that bring the expertise to go, what do we need to be saying to government, or how can we get this idea out? For example, speak your first language at home. Don't try and speak your English that's not so strong. Actually,
interesting.
Speak your first language. It's better for your children. So, yeah.
I've never thought about that.
It's scary how many people haven't thought about that. And unfortunately, a lot of migrants come here and they think because they're coming to Aotearoa, they should speak English at home. It'll be better for their children. Their children will grow up better with better English. It's actually not true. The reverse is true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now you say that, I go, that makes absolute sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the phone yesterday to one of our members. She's a grandmother, and she speaks 2 or 3 languages. And listening to her, talking to her mokapuna,
yeah,
and I'm not sure. And I won't say names, but it was so funny that she was playing a game with them, and these kids were being. One of the kids had cheated, right? And so we're on the phone, and when she's trying, one of the kids had cheated, and all hell broke loose, right? And she's talking away to them, I think in Māori, and talking away to them, and then it was escalating. She went, "Oh, shut up!" There you go. There's an English word that just went boom, just like that. But I love listening to her talk to her grandchildren, and I think these kids, I think they're learning 2 languages, maybe 3. And they switch from one to the other so beautifully. And I think, man, that must be so good for them.
Yeah. That's a treasure. They're so lucky, those kids.
Yeah. And I just think this is, such a wonderful thing for these kids to pick up so early. Yeah. Your biggest frustration with this job? No, different question. I go back. Tell me what it's like to run a not-for-profit. Because you came out of government, right, which didn't really prepare you for this job, I'd imagine.
True.
Apart from what's it like running a not-for-profit?
It's exciting and scary. The thing about not-for-profits, especially one like us, where a lot of our funding depends on philanthropic grants from, foundations and trusts and people. And we get a few government contracts, but it's rare, relatively. So trusts will give you money one year and then the next year they'll give it to someone else. And so it's really, really hard to predict what your income's going to be, even 6 months in advance. And suddenly you might get a chunk of money for something that you've really been eking out, trying to keep going and find, oh, hooray, we've got some money, but you've got that for this year.
And you've got to go and find people to deliver.
Yeah. And then will you have money next year for it? And meanwhile, you've got this other thing that's been going really well, but now it's not attracted any money right now, and you're scrabbling around to find other people to go to for it. And so it's all the time. I think the skill that I bring, that is the most important, the only skill, I could do my job with this skill on its own, is hope. And you have to hold hope that the world can change, like that this little organisation can do something to make a difference that'll really be worthwhile. And you have to hold out hope that actually, yes, someone will give you some money tomorrow so you can keep your people employed. And you have to hold hope that your educators can change what they do, and that families can change what they do. And I mean, I have to hold hope for myself that I can do this even, and I think I would be a complete mess if I didn't have that ability to just hang in there.
Yep. I heard a fascinating quote recently about if there's only one skill a leader needs is optimism, which is hope, optimism. They're pretty similar. Because you would have done stuff that other people would just go, what are you even trying to do for? Yeah?
Yeah, totally.
And why are you even going to try and do this?
Yeah. And
maybe if people knew what was going on in your head, they'd be a bit concerned sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you've got to hold the hope for a long time. Like the languages work that I've been doing with that committee of people who come together a few times a year, and we did it. We decided first, well, we're going to write a languages strategy for Auckland, and that'll help bring things together. And we did that. It took us a couple of years because you've got to consult a lot on something like that. And that was all fine. And then we thought, well, we'll carry on meeting. And we carried on meeting, and we've done a few things, and we've written some briefings to people and submissions and things like that. But really, no huge thing has changed. And then this year, so this is now 8 years on, and this year, because of the COVID funding, and because the right person is in the right place in government, what person I mean, not party, there is funding for Pacific bilingual education. This is something I was pushing for behind the scenes in the Ministry of Education 15 years ago. And other people have been pushing for 30 years. 30 years with no support. And finally, some funding from government. And because we had a relationship within that group with some researchers who were expert in that, and with some people who could actually put feet on the ground, we were able to put in, not me, not COMET, but the group, and get some funding, and stuff is happening. And you could say, this project fell in our lap. Government came and they put out this money and we put in an application and we got it, and just like that, project fell in our lap. Actually, it's 8 years of relationship building and advocacy.
Overnight success.
Yeah. And that's what they all look like.
Yeah, overnight success. It's there is so much to be said for just pure bloody mindedness and tenacity.
Yeah.
And then the flip side is, when do you quit, right? Because, quitting is also good. It's a fine line, and it's so much easier afterwards and go, oh, yeah, of course, but when you are in that space of fighting, it can be bloody lonely.
Can. I'm afraid I never learnt that other skill of quitting.
Of quitting.
I have yet to learn that one.
Yeah, I quit with a project once after 14 months, and it was in the ag sector, and it was around education, and I couldn't get anybody on board, and farming has developed, and back then I was involved in a small corporate, and I could see that the skill development was not keeping up with the new models of farming, so the technical stuff was nearly there, but you call it the soft skills, the managerial skills weren't. And so I set about 14 months with a group of people and we just got knocked back by middle management in the end. So we could get the buy-in from the chairs and the CEOs, and then we started dealing with middle management, and they were just they were threatened by it, and didn't bring the best out of me, Susan. Didn't bring the best out of me at all. And the irony is, it's needed more now than ever before. And and collective intelligence, I had somebody else was going to run it. This was going to be my project.
Oh, really?
And I couldn't get this thing up off the ground, and collective intelligence had no bureaucracy around it or none of that, because I had to play the game with the organisations, with Sheep and Beef New Zealand and Dairy New Zealand and Federated Farmers. Oh, I'm not good at that. And then so I had to quit. And the hole is still there, and nobody's taken it up, and the need is greater than ever before. And that was around education. And it was interesting to see how triggered people became, I believe, with people becoming more informed and having their own opinion. And I didn't want anybody controlling this thing, because I said, yes, we'll give you funding, but here are the are the terms.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, fuck off. The terms are going to kill the idea.
Yeah.
Those terms are just not going to let it fly. It'll just become another bureaucracy, and a whole lot of money get gobbled up in the system and not deliver. And you know what? It breaks my heart that didn't get up and going, because the need is glaringly obvious that we need to develop those skills in the rural sector. But anyway. So, yeah, I did quit, and I'm very pleased I quit, because it was becoming really unhealthy.
Yeah, good on you.
Really unhealthy. Yeah. It was, and I was becoming really grumpy. Really grumpy.
Surely not. Isn't that a skill?
It's a skill. It's a skill. Susan, what is the education system example here or overseas? What's the education system you look at and go, that's fabulous? Are there any?
The thing that's working best here is the kura system. So the kaupapa Māori early childhood and schooling, shiningly clearly the data shows that those kids do better.
And how many kids are involved in that?
That's about somewhere between 5 and 10% of Māori, so nowhere near enough.
So small.
Yeah.
And
Small and grossly underfunded, which is why not all parents feel comfortable to send their kids there.
And what's the data that's coming back that impresses you?
Mostly it's NCEA because that's the stuff that's easily measured.
Right, so it's the flow on
Yeah.
years later.
Yeah.
And what are they doing that's so good?
They're doing two things. Well, they're doing one thing and they're not doing another. So the thing they're doing is teaching kids through their culture and language. So the kids grow up really strong in their language and their culture, and their learning is entirely integrated in that. So they don't have to be a different person when they're at school from what they are at home, and the things that they bring from home, from their culture, are working for them in their learning instead of being a barrier, as they would be in a mainstream school. And the other thing is the thing they're not doing, which is exposing kids to racism. And unfortunately, again, the data shows that kids report really high levels of racism in our mainstream schools. And you can imagine that if you were exposed to that all day, every day, the little things of low expectations and the more outward, actually negative comments and actions, you start to feel you're not great, and you start to feel really angry with school, with society, rejected. So, of course your learning's not going to go so well. Your life is not going to go so well.
I haven't thought about that either. Right, seriously.
Yeah. It's tragic. It's a horrible thing to think about. One of the many things that make me angry. Yeah.
I'm pleased we're sitting a reasonable distance apart. Seriously, I hadn't thought about that impact of, I was thinking the impact of racism being here and now, not thinking about the long-term lifetime impact. Mm. And I know that sounds naive. And what is being done about that?
There are some things. So, the report that came out that made it really obvious was from the Commissioner for Children. They did some research about 4 years ago with young people, just asked them, what did they think about school? And they didn't expect racism to come up, but it was like number 2. And so government have actually paid attention to that, and there are some programs going on. And programs can be helpful. It's really about changing hearts and minds. It's about that revelation that you get when you really come into face to face with another culture, and you go, oh my goodness, there is a different way of thinking about the world. This is not just some traditions and a language. This is actually a different worldview. And you start to realise that actually all around the world there are people with different worldviews from you. And maybe you lose a little bit of your pride and assumption of, superiority, and you then perhaps can work with kids of other cultures without judging them, and actually see them as what they bring rather than, they don't have my culture or my language. And it's not an easy step. That's not something you can do in a, one-day PD session.
No. How do you think this teaching New Zealand history is going to impact society?
I think in the medium term it'll be huge. I think it'll really change. I hope anyway. I hope it will change the dynamic, that people will start to come through with a different attitude. Because you look at the reaction to the apology for the Dawn raids.
Yes.
Just this week, and a few people were saying, well, but hang on, overstayers, shouldn't we be policing overstaying? And not realising that actually the only people who had dawn raids were Pacific families, and not all of them were overstayers. It was just targeting Pacific families, not people who didn't have residency. And quite apart from the way that the raids were done, which was horrendous, the racism behind that isn't actually recognised. A lot of people literally just don't know that that's what happened. And as we learn that, that is going to change people's attitudes and the way they work with each other.
And the great irony was, Jacinda Ardern's father was a policeman in that force.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if he's still doing the job, but he then went on to be the Commissioner for the Pacific and has done a marvellous job up there. And you think of that young man, I wonder how uncomfortable he would have been at that point, going, this doesn't fit with my values.
Mm. Yeah, and I know she said that he did feel uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah. And so, and it just depends on what lens, but I'm really interested, and I can see havoc coming with kids coming home from school.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about New Zealand history, and that's going to be really uncomfortable. It's going to be really uncomfortable for lots of families. And I feel sorry for some kids going home and talking about what they've learned at school, because it won't be, it's not going to be welcomed. I don't know. Yeah. It's so the future for COMET, Susan. Is it staying on the path you're on now? Like, are you in the zone now?
No, we're never in the zone. That would be terrible. You always got to be getting better. One of the things we really want to focus on over the next while is how we get to be better treaty partners and more, the ally role. We're never going to be, not for a long time anyway, a kaupapa Māori organisation. We are a Pākehā organisation. We're attached to Auckland Council.
You're as white as white.
We're as white middle class. We're a very diverse team and board, but the organisation, the DNA is, it's a British model,
Right.
And that's, that's okay, because both sides of Te Tiriti have a role. But how do we, as a Pākehā organisation, get better at being an ally and being a treaty partner, and enabling and working with Māori in ways that are in the Taina role? The tuakana Taina, so tuakana is older brother, Taina is younger brother, and that relationship of coming in as Taina, we have something to learn, but also being prepared to be sometimes tuakana, so that our core mutual learning piece, we bring something, they bring something, but prioritising what Māori aspirations are and what they bring, and coming alongside and supporting. And we've got a lot to learn about that. And we think we've probably got some structural things. So we're actually looking at our board model at the moment and bringing in some expertise to help us look at, do we move to a co-chair model or a bicameral board, or something like that that gives formal recognition and decision-making power to Māori within COMET, around COMET. Yeah.
And it puts a lot of pressure on the Māori community because it's a lack of people, are stretched so much, because as this demand ramps up, because we're going through exactly the same process now, and we had a wonderful young, one of our scholarships, young Māori woman on our board, and she hasn't been able to continue because she's so stretched, right? And she's a young mother, and she's got a career, and husband dealing with the stresses of his job at one stage and so forth, and she's had to pull back from being on our board, which is was not an easy decision. It was the right decision for her, but there is that resource is really thin, and that certain people get pulled and pushed in so many directions, and it's really tough.
Yeah, it is really tough, and it's something we're thinking about too. And how do we do that without putting pressure on? And it's a tension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing is sometimes not that easy. Susan, can we switch to this, because I'm really interested in this topic of decolonisation.
Yeah.
What is that?
So that's thinking about the history. So coming back to the history of Aotearoa and the impact that colonisation had, which was not just in terms of taking away land and rights and all of those practical things that were awful and happened. It's also the unconscious things that happen that impact on the way people think about themselves and the way the systems work. And you think about it, and every system here is basically based on something in England, which is a long way away and really a whole other culture now. And so all of those things don't fit. And the attitudes that we have tend still to put people in boxes, and they're not helpful boxes. So decolonisation is really, how do we interrogate all of that and somehow get rid of the boxes? So what would it look like actually? What does it look like to think about this in a Māori way? It doesn't mean that has to be the only way we think about it, but it needs to be one of the ways we think about it. And how can we have choice about how we deal with this in various cultures, but particularly in Māori and other, I guess, given that this is their place. So that's I guess that's my understanding of it, and that's not going to happen overnight, and it's not something you can have a quick conversation about. Oh, right, I see what I have to do.
We could have it done by Christmas, right?
Yeah, totally.
Susan, there is a segment of society that are fearful of this.
Yeah, I tell you a story about that. So with the languages policy work, when we launched the original strategy, 2015, November, at the Auckland University, and we came out with a statement, and it was me that came out with it because, I was the spokesperson, where, we want Auckland to be trilingual. We want everybody to speak English, te reo Māori, and another language, their heritage language or whatever.
I remember that.
And it got quite a lot of press coverage. And a lot of the feedback was fantastic. But some of it was so vitriolic, I have never imagined. One person got hold of my personal text number, I don't know how, and sent me messages saying how disgusting it was and how dare I suggest that his children learn that language. And he thought this was the worst insult. He called me a school principal. I mean, really.
Susan, I knew it was going to get bad, but not. Okay.
I've actually never been a school principal, so, I was quite flattered. But the rest of the message was... And some people still get really, really angry about people just speaking te reo Māori in their vicinity.
The debate or the conversation I'm really enjoying at the moment is the use of Aotearoa.
Yeah.
Right? And that for some reason people think that Jacinda's thought this up and she's pushing it, and that 80% of the nation don't want this to happen. And I'm just thinking, have they been asleep?
Yeah.
This has been quietly happening for some time. And they go, we've always been New Zealand. I'm going, what? When? What? But it's really interesting how, I don't know, triggered or defensive people get to this. Like it's quite something, isn't it? It's quite something. And I wonder what they're really scared of. Mm. Do you have any idea what they're scared of?
No, the unknown, the other, maybe they're not actually very comfortable about being New Zealand in the first place. The sort of homophobic reaction sometimes people have is because they're not entirely happy with their own sexuality.
Oh.
Maybe there's an equivalent. I don't know.
One of my challenges in the last month, I talked to the crew about it on Monday morning, was that I need to dial my curiosity up because I've been a little bit judgmental this last month, especially with farmers, and I've been very judgy towards the farmers. And dressing it up to be neutral or something, but it's not. And they're feeling disturbed about changes and so forth, and I've just been judging them. And it doesn't. I do get my jollies being judgmental for a little while, but then you get the hangover from it as well. Yeah. And I realise that, and so this, I need to dial up my curiosity with that space, and I'm trying to do it with this space of people getting upset around the term Aotearoa, and this has been coming for a long time. This just happens to be gathering momentum. And it's happened organically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's people on the ground who are using it.
Yeah.
And then other people go, oh yeah, it's such a cool name and it's such a cool association, and yeah, I want to do that too. And then, yeah.
And it's a bit like, when the national anthem was first sung in Māori, it's just, man, she was brave, just out there doing it. And bang, just like that, it changed. So maybe it is a fair thing that because I can't see how we can stop it now. Not that I want to stop it, but it's just gathering its own natural momentum, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, I think pretty soon we won't be talking about Aotearoa New Zealand. We'll be just saying Aotearoa, and everybody will be doing it, and we'll be, and a bit later we'll kind of go, just like we go, Mount Egmont, huh?
Oh yeah.
Who's ever heard of that for the last, I don't know how many years? we're all perfectly used to taranaki.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. That's a great example. What happened to Egmont? Is it still there? So what's next for Susan Warren?
I'm getting to the point where I'd quite like to slow down in a few years' time, and I don't know how to think about that yet. So I've got a few friends who've retired, and part of me is looking at that and going, ooh, imagine that, not having to get up at a particular time, not having the pressure, it's stressful work. And then the other half of me is going, yeah, but what would I do? And would I just sit around all day reading books, and which nothing wrong with that, but sounds pretty good. But so I'm not sure, and I am, so my husband and I are at that stage. He's just got his gold card, which is very exciting. And it's beginning to make it all feel a little bit real. And so we're still playing with that and going, yeah, but not yet, right? And so I don't know.
It's an interesting stage, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting. My wife Kate has forbidden me to retire. She said, "You're a pain in the ass to live with now. Retired, you'd be impossible." And I have no desire to retire, none. I couldn't. I still love what I'm doing, and having said that, this morning when I was trying to work out the logistics of getting around to Auckland, it is bloody tough here, trying to get your day organised. And I knew if I got to this meeting on time, everything was to be fine. But just navigating the traffic and whatever, and trying to work it out, and so I've parked my car near here, and I'm going to finish here, park my car here, and then Ubered to I even walked to one.
We'll make an Aucklander of you yet.
over a kilometre. It was downhill, but that was but it was. So I was thinking this morning, this is hard work. I did think that this is hard work, and I've got to have the technology and stuff to get me from here to there and get that. So that's a reality, and I could imagine that would trying to keep the deadlines and things would be tough. But I couldn't. I have to get onto this subject. It was about the future.
You asked me what next.
It was supposed to be not, but that was just a silly answer. Give me another answer. Susan, we're going to wrap up soon. We're over 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think slightly.
Okay. What is your subject you want to wrap up on? I've got one, but you go first.
No, you've got one then. You go for
How's your collective intelligence team going?
They're awesome. They're so cool, and I love being able to go and know that A, it's a safe place, and B, I'm going to be really challenged, and people will go, yeah, hang on, Susan. Bit like you do. And because they know me, and they know when I'm obfuscating, and they know when I'm carefully ignoring things because, those things that happened 6 months or 2 years ago. And I really love that. And that's the thing you, as a CEO, you don't have. You don't have a team around you who can poke you, and you can't be just completely real because you have to be the boss. You can be real, but you can't be completely real. And so that those days with my CQ team they're crucial to me. That's my sanity.
And Susan, you've been a wonderful advocate and prodder of me for a long time. We don't need too many of you in the community. There's always been one or two. I had another one years ago, Marianne Bevan. She was a pain in the ass like you do. But you pushed all the time of increasing the diversity, and it was a good prod. And it was a constant prod, and I'm stoked now when I look at your team, and we're getting there with the diversity thing, right? It's just, but it takes work, and it's not easy to do sometimes. Right? It's easier, And so I'm delighted that your team now has evolved to have way more diversity than when you first joined. Yeah. And also seeing how much you appreciated that too.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Harv.
No. And it's amazing when you start to understand it, what the power of that diversity can bring in cutting through complexity. It is the most stunning tool. But you've also got to create the safety, equity, and allow the quiet voices to speak up, because noisy buggers like you and I apparently aren't always right.
Yeah,
which I'm not sure is true.
Yeah, no, me neither, but I think people tell me that sometimes.
Yeah, but it's so I do really enjoy where your team's got to now, which is fabulous. Yeah. So has that sparked anything? Oh, at this point, are we going to wind up, Susan? Have we? You're looking at your list.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list.
The school mum's looking at a list. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, and we did go over the 3 minutes, and it will surprise you. People do listen to this, and they listen to the end as well. And so, have you been? You're okay with this length of interview?
Well, it's good fun when you're the one talking. Come on. Yeah. Will I or anyone I know listen to this? Well, I hope not. But but it's been fun to do.
Look, I've enjoyed the whole irony of it, and I've enjoyed the whole thing of when you're coming 3 months. I thought I'll get you back for this. Yeah, Susan, thank you for your time. Continue keeping up the great work. We need this, and keep prodding. You're really good at it.
Thank you, Harv.
You've just been listening to an episode of Stuff That Matters Now, brought to you by Collective Intelligence. I hope you enjoyed listening to the fun stuff, the rugged stuff, and the complete stuff-ups that have helped this particular Collective Intelligence member evolve while making the world a better place. Do check out our Stuff That Matters Now podcast series on your favourite podcast provider, or visit our website www.collectiveintelligence.co.nz to get links to new episodes. Contact us if you want to learn more about how we can help you evolve yourself and others. Thanks for listening.